What is up? What's going on, Flex Network Nation? And what is going on, DFS Army Nation? It's your boy at Sealy_Shane. I am flying solo today for the Week 6 Waiver Wire podcast. My buddy at Alan Seslowski is not able to join me tonight, but you can follow him at Alan Seslowski. And of course, follow us at the Flex Network 1 on Twitter. Guys, also, take a few minutes to go down, rate and review us. Give us 5 stars, please. You have no idea how valuable it is to us. It helps us, understand that we're actually doing something pretty good here. So we'd really appreciate that if you could do that. And you can also subscribe to us on YouTube. So, all right, I'm not going to bury the lead. It's not exactly a sexy week by any stretch of the imagination on the waiver wire this week, but we're going to go through some plays, some guys that you might want to target. Kind of high-level stuff. Again, nothing really blockbuster this week, but let's get started with the quarterbacks. So looking at some of these quarterbacks, these are guys that you're probably going to want to be targeting, more so in 2 quarterback leagues. For the most part right now, if you're in a 1 quarterback league, there's nothing really that jumps out to you. I was actually surprised to see that Gardner Minshew is still only 24% owned in most leagues. So if he is available, maybe you got a guy on a bye this week. He can be a guy you can go and stash. I wouldn't spend any more than, say, 5% of my budget at all, if not like closer to 1 to 2% in a 1 quarterback league. And I would be shocked if he's available in any 2 quarterback or super flex leagues. But one guy who may be available for like a 1 week's, push-in, stand-in, if you will, is Devlin Hodges with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Mason Rudolph last week took a pretty vicious hit, and he currently is in the concussion protocol. So that's a guy that likely it's just going to be a 1 week stand-in. But, if you really need him, if you're in a 2 quarterback league, I'd go in and I would probably spend between about 10 to 12% of my budget. I would, even having like a third stringer in there is probably going to be a better bet unless you've got some pretty strong flex options in that super flex. And then obviously if you're in a 2 quarterback league and you're desperate, I would go upwards of 15 to 20 because we talk about it all the time, man. We have no idea. It's a week-to-week league, and most of our leagues are head-to-head, which means you need to win this week. So it's worth going out and spending a little bit of your budget just to make sure you lock in that extra quarterback spot and just don't take a big fat 0 in that spot. But, pay attention. For those of you who don't do waivers until Wednesday, injury reports are usually released on Wednesdays. So we should have a better idea in terms of where Mason Rudolph is sitting. Okay, I'm going to jump to the wide receiver position. Again, there's nothing really totally sexy at the top of the board here, but these are a few guys you could probably target. So Mohamed Sanu, this is a guy that he's kind of old reliable. This week, again, he got 5 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. He's only 42% owned in leagues. So if you're in a 12-team league, if he's out there and you just need depth at the position as these injuries really start to build up, he could be a guy that you'd be more than happy with to put in a flex spot, and he can produce for you. He's been producing for the last 3-4 weeks. Another guy who he had a bit of a slower week this week, but he's still getting the targets is Deontay Johnson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He seems to be actually gaining some of that chemistry with Mason Rudolph. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen this next week, but Deontay Johnson's a guy that you can definitely look to target. Again, probably more of a bench stash. You might want to spend between about 5 to 7% of your budget. Guys, none of these guys you're going to be blowing your budgets on, right? So it's only if if you're trying to fill in some bye week players or some injuries. Coming off the bye weeks, Miami Dolphins, Preston Williams, still only 8% owned. Yet this is a guy who, through the last 4 weeks, has received 5 targets, 6 targets, 12 targets, and then 7 targets. I still don't buy Devontae Parker. I've never been a big Devontae Parker guy. He's actually still available. He's only owned in 9% of leagues. But I would rather have Preston Williams, who is looking to be the target leader in that offense right now. Albert Wilson just doesn't seem to get healthy. And for my money, Albert Wilson is probably the best wide receiver on that team right now. But it's not a very good team. He's not reliable. He might injure himself again. So if Preston Williams is available, I would say he's worth picking up, maybe 3 to 5% of your budget. A guy who had a big week this week and pretty much trolled everybody in that Kansas City game was Byron Pringle. This was a guy who During the offseason, there was a lot of hype about, oh, no, is it going to be Demarcus Robinson? Is it going to be Byron Pringle that maybe steps in with when that whole Tyreek Hill uncertainty was coming up? And Byron Pringle did have a pretty decent preseason. Look, guys, bottom line is, Tyreek Hill, he's starting to participate more and more in drills and practices. So there's actually a possibility that he could be back as early as this week, which is going to be huge. I mean, we saw what happened with the Kansas City offense last night, where they kind of got shut down. Obviously Patrick Mahomes is a little bit injured, but Indy kind of took it to them. So Byron Pringle, he's a gamble, right? Is it going to be McCole Hardman 1 week? Sammy Watkins is down, so keep an eye out to see. I'm recording Monday night, so keep an eye out to see if it's going to be a long-term thing, or if it's just going to be maybe a 1 week absence. But Byron Pringle could be a guy. I'd spend maybe a couple percent, 3 to 5%, same thing. Nothing crazy, but if he's going to be a starter in that Kansas City offense, he might be a guy that you want to roster. But for my money, I'd prefer Demarcus Robinson. I would prefer McCole Hardman. Excuse me. You got to think one of the biggest things for everybody who watched the game last night was they talked about how Kansas City just wasn't running the damn ball last night. LaShawn McCoy didn't look good. Damian Williams didn't look good. Darrell Williams did nothing. I think he got a big fat 0. So you got to think that, especially if Mahomes is hurt, they might start leaning on that running game a little bit more, in which case, if Damian Williams is out there, he's not going to be available in your waiver wires, but maybe you start sniffing around. If you need a little bit of running back depth, maybe the owner is not too scared to part with him. Talking to Al, Season Long says he believes a little bit more in Darrell Williams than Damian Williams. Big part of it, basically, he said he has a tendency to fade those late round free agents, those undrafted free agents, where they have he's 26, 27 years old and he has his breakout, right? And he's done pretty well. And you know what? Al's been right so far this year, but it's hard to say, is Damian Williams talented and just injured, or is he just, he's kind of a fluke last year? It's hard to say, but Damian Williams might be a guy you might want to go target. That's, for another conversation, but you could do worse, I would say. I'm going to go to the tight end next, because again, there's a few options of guys that I like here. So Gerald Everett, man, he had another good week. 2 weeks ago he had 8 targets. This week he had 11 targets. I think he got a touchdown in both those games. This is a guy who he was an offseason darling last year, right? Everybody's like, okay, this guy's talented. He's an athlete. He's somebody that Jared Goff could probably really rely on. But there were just so many options in that passing game that he just never really took that next step to become the leading tight end, and a tight end that's in the discussion of somebody you want to start every single week. But the last 2 weeks he's done really well, and who knows what's going to happen with Brandon Cooks right now. That injury would look pretty bad. When I watched it live, it kind of looked like like a shoulder thing, or maybe like a collarbone, but I don't know if it's that severe. But Gerald Everett's a guy that I think that in this, I wouldn't even say it's a tight end wasteland anymore. There's a fair number of decent tight end options, but if you're a guy that's been hanging, or a team that's been hanging on to maybe like a Jared Cook or an Eric Ebron, or even like a Vance McDonald, I would cut any of those guys for Gerald Everett right now. Just give me a piece of that offense, and I'm pretty happy. So then another guy that probably got picked up last week, right, would be Chris Herndon. He is back finally next week. He's now served a 4-game suspension, as well as the Jets have had their bye week. So he is back, and he's a guy that everybody was talking about coming out of last season. He may still be available on your waiver wire just because he hasn't played any games yet. So definitely go take a look at that. And then with the, working off that, it's Hunter Henry. Right now, Hunter Henry is somebody that he's starting to practice more. And hey, what's going on, Kevin? How we doing, brother? I'm riding solo today, man. Going 5-0 because all your help every week. Great analysis and deep information. Thanks, brother. Really appreciate it. Yeah, man. So going back to Hunter Henry. So this is a guy that's finally actually practicing. He was practicing last week. In a 2 tight end league, I actually drafted him. I had to drop him, and I was fortunate enough to be able to pick him up again last week. This is a guy who, look, he's somebody that we've all had a lot of hope And he's somebody that, if he's available on your waiver wire, he's worth a pickup, especially in 12-team leagues. I mean, if you're in a 10-team league and you've got a short bench, maybe not. But Hunter Henry, he could be back in a couple weeks. And right now, like, the Chargers need him, man. So when he comes back, I think he's going to be actively part of the game. So he should be a guy that you'd want to target. A guy like Hunter Henry, Gerald Everett, Chris Herndon, all these guys, I would probably target between 5 to 10% of my budget if they're available right now in the waiver wire. Okay, so then moving on to the running back position. So there is not exactly a lot of running backs this week. Really, when we talk about running backs on the waiver wire, it's like a Wayne Gallman, right? Where Saquon goes down or the leading running back goes down, and you go to run out and grab that handcuff. So a couple high efficiency handcuffs that have been proven to actually have a little bit of standalone value so far this year. Ito Smith, obviously, he seems to be getting a lot of goal line work with Atlanta. He got another touchdown again this week, which, I mean, Devonta Freeman owners are just they're crying themselves to sleep right now, because he's just like, yes, Freeman got a touchdown this week, but man, he's just not producing. I think it was like, his first touchdown since 2017 season, like week 17. Like, that's sad. That's unfortunate. Devonta Freeman's better than that, but I mean, ultimately, I think that Ito Smith, he has a little bit of standalone value, and if Freeman goes down, then he's going to be the starter in that offense. Another guy, Chase Edmonds, same thing. He got a touchdown again this week. Likely not a lot of standalone value week to week. I mean, if you're playing him, it's likely because you're in a pretty deep league and you have some injury issues, or you have some bye week issues that you're trying to battle through. But ultimately, he's not a guy you're going to want to start every week. But he's somebody that if you've got space on your bench, he might be worth stashing. A couple, 1 to 2% of your budget. Rex Burkhead, he didn't play last week. He may play next week. Look, guys, this isn't somebody I'm recommending that you go and get. The reason I'm bringing him up is because I know people have been talking about him. 2 weeks ago, before the injury, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, we got to go pick up Rex Burkhead. We don't know what's happening in that New England offense." The bottom line is, I wouldn't trust that New England offense, right? Again, Brandon Bolden caught a reception TD. I think it was like a 25-yard touchdown again this week. So any given week, you have no idea. And unless you're rolling with James White, who's got a pretty defined role, then I'm not really comfortable playing any of these New England running backs, including Sony Michel, because, man, he's just not getting it, right? And I'm convinced, and I stand by it, that Sony Michel, the reason that he's not getting a lot of play early on in the season is because they're trying to preserve him for the off, or not for the offseason, for the playoffs, which, they're looking pretty good so far to make the playoffs. I wouldn't put it past them. So they have a bigger picture in mind. They haven't really been facing a lot of like real serious competition. So frankly, they haven't really needed Sony Michel. But I would think that, Sony is a guy that they're probably going to lean on a little bit heavier as New England weather hits wintertime, right? It's miserable. He's the kind of guy that can pound the rock. And I think that they're trying to preserve that knee for later on in the season. So don't go out and get Rex Burkhead. I can't really recommend that. Raheem Mostert, same sort of thing. I mean, he's playing right now as San Francisco versus the Cleveland Browns as I'm recording this. And so far, he's pretty much done nothing. And just like in previous weeks, he's done nothing. San Francisco reminds me a lot of New England, where they've got their specialist backs and they're going to use them. And any given week, you have no idea who's going to score. So I wouldn't really recommend that. I mean, Matt Breida, Tevin Coleman, if you've got them, play them maybe as a flex option, but just be prepared to get shut out. You don't know any given week. Tony Pollard, same situation. He had a good week a couple weeks ago, but unless Zeke goes down, he doesn't really have a lot of value. But, if you've got an extra spot on your bench, 1 to 2%, hell, maybe even just a $0 bid, Tony Pollard wouldn't be the worst person in the world. Alexander Mattison, guys, he looks good. He may just have some standalone value. Dalvin Cook is an absolute stud. Number 2 running back so far, I want to say in the fantasy season, behind only Christian McCaffrey. And man, if he goes down, Alexander Madison's going to have a serious role in that offense. They're not going to change their entire offense when they have a guy like Madison. So he's somebody who, if you've got space on your bench, above all these guys, I would probably target Alexander Mattison. Malcolm Brown, this was a guy who came out and put up like 17 points in the PPR in week 1, and people were like, oh my God, Todd Gurley. It's true. We're gonna lose. Like he's gonna be scaled back. Todd Gurley's been playing pretty good. Todd Gurley's been getting the touches, but if he goes down, Malcolm Brown's gonna be that handcuff. So I would target maybe 1 to 2% if any of these guys are available on your waiver wire. So I guess just to summarize how I would probably rank these guys in terms of priority, I would probably go with Alexander Madison first, then Edo Smith, then Tony Pollard, then Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds, Tony Pollard are kind of the same. And then distance Raheem Mostert. Again, Mostert may have some play if there's an injury, but we saw Jeff Wilson came up, so I don't love him either. So that's it, guys. Not really a crazy week on the waiver wire. Bye weeks are coming up though, so maybe we need these depth plays. And if you have some extra space, guys, don't be holding multiple, like 3 tight ends or 3 quarterbacks. Hell, I wouldn't even want to really be carrying 2 tight ends or 2 quarterbacks. I would drop one of those guys and pick up one of these high efficiency handcuffs. Who knows? It's like that, scratch off lottery ticket, right? It could win you your league one season. Hell, why can't it be this season? So that's it, guys. So give us 5 stars. We really appreciate it. Rate and review. We read all the reviews. We really appreciate it. You can follow me at Sealy_Shane on Twitter. You can find us at the Flex Network 1 on Twitter. I like the moonlight as the Flex Network 1. My boy at Alan Seslowski couldn't make it tonight, but you can always give him a follow. And guys, go check out DFS Army, man. These guys are absolutely freaking killing it. They had the Millie Maker winner from the FanDuel Millionaire Contest 2 weeks ago. The geek Kevin, he's on our show often, he's winning every single week. He keeps giving us screenshots where he's winning 20+ grand a week. I mean, go to dfsarmy.com and get a membership. It's a community, and they will help you win. So that's it. I'm out. Everybody be safe and enjoy football. Bye.